This episode is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get free access to Nebula, the new streaming platform built by and for creators, when you sign up for CuriosityStream at the link below.
Well, governments globally are enacting strict measures to contain the coronavirus, raising questions about individual freedoms and privacy rights during a pandemic.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for the formation of an emergency government.
South Korea has taken similar steps by using mobile phone and satellite technology to track potential carriers.
Congress has granted additional powers to President Duterte to address the COVID-19 outbreak in the country.
The emergency decree gives various powers, including the potential restriction of domestic travel, censoring media.
But what we're really concerned about is that this location tracking, the health-related information is going to be used for other purposes, particularly by governments who are using surveillance to track down activists or human rights defenders or journalists or even opposition figures.
You know what they say, you should never let a good crisis go to waste. For would-be autocrats around the world, any chance to secure ever more iron-fisted control of their country is a good thing. And the coronavirus pandemic is quite an opportunity. What better chance do you have of implementing draconian laws than when all your citizens are under strict shelter-in-place orders? It's no surprise that some world leaders have jumped at the chance to consolidate power. But under such dire circumstances, are their actions justified? A deadly global threat does call for an unprecedented response, but there's a difference between unprecedented measures and unlimited control. The laws passed and powers granted during crises are often hastily reviewed or voted upon without much deliberation, and this can lead to serious problems. It's not uncommon to see laws passed in response to a particular crisis situation stick around long after the crisis is resolved. For example,
Congress, the White House, and the Pentagon have all been mighty busy this week. But what more do we know after a week of shifting messages concerning health, politics, and war? Today, the president signed a big new anti-terrorism bill that would expand the government's ability to track down terrorists, but at some cost.
Mr. Speaker, some of my colleagues today will offer a bill to reauthorize the Patriot Act. It'll have the thin varnish of reform on it, designed to whitewash the egregious constitutional violations that have been going on.
The Patriot Act was drafted in response to 9/11. It was designed to make it easier for intelligence agencies to gather information on suspected terrorists, with the unpleasant side effect of allowing drastically increased surveillance on the American public. That was back in 2001. It's now 2020, almost 2 decades later, and we're still stuck with it. This is pretty common. Once a population is used to something, they become desensitized. So what if the government is spying on us, right? 9/11 gave the United States in particular very useful cover in expanding the power of the state in keeping an eye on its citizens. What we're seeing with coronavirus is much more widespread, and shockingly authoritarian. The Philippines, Israel, Thailand, the US, Britain, Bolivia, South Korea, and in the most brazen example, Hungary, have all granted emergency powers that would be unthinkable under any other circumstance. Israel's Prime Minister, Netanyahu, has given his security agencies the power to track citizens using their cell phone data, and has ordered the nation's courts to shut down, conveniently forestalling his trial for corruption. South Korea, who should be commended for flattening the curve in their country, still implemented incredibly intrusive surveillance measures that will likely remain in place after the pandemic passes. In the Philippines, President Duterte, who once compared his country's constitution to a scrap of toilet paper, was granted near limitless power to handle the coronavirus, which is rather alarming considering his track record of jailing critics, threatening journalists, and pushing for the return of the death penalty to aid in his violent war on drugs. The Prime Minister of Thailand has assumed the authority to censor the media, and journalists have been threatened and sued for criticizing the government's response to the crisis. In Bolivia, elections have been suspended, another instance of convenient timing because the upcoming presidential election, which had been scheduled for May, was going to be quite high profile. The previous president, Evo Morales, had been deposed in a military coup after violent protests rocked the nation. The interim president has now consolidated power, ordered military police to suppress large demonstrations, and intends to formally run for the office sometime later in the year. The United States narrowly avoided new legislation that would have allowed the indefinite detaining of citizens without trial, as well as the repeal of legal protections for asylum seekers. Even British leadership has ended up with some very questionable new powers, including a 2-year license to indefinitely detain people suspected of having coronavirus, ban protests, and put 20,000 troops on standby, which supposedly won't be used for additional policing. While authorizing the detaining of citizens based on suspicion alone is very problematic, what we're seeing from Hungary is downright terrifying. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, already widely denounced as a wannabe dictator, has finally found his chance to snatch up all the powers he's ever wanted. Orban now has the power to suspend already existing laws, bypass parliament on new ones that he doesn't like, limit freedom of expression, and suspend all elections and referenda. And just to be safe, he demanded these powers indefinitely. He is now ruling the country by personal decree. So there you go, that's how you get a dictator. Some additional new legislation gives Orban broad authority to arrest and imprison anyone he finds to have distributed distorted or false information, as defined by himself, of course. Orban is perhaps the clearest example of a politician obviously and successfully dragging their country to autocracy. Over the past decade, the ruling party, led by Viktor Orban, have waged war on every institution that could challenge their propaganda machine. They took over the majority of the nation's media, handing it off to one of Orban's childhood friends. They shaped university curriculum to suit their twisted view of history. They've torn down old monuments and replaced them with installations honoring Hungary's interwar fascist regime. Now, after a decade of work, the transformation into an intensely nationalist and, as one Hungarian philosopher put it, post-fascist Hungary is complete. Orban has secured total control, including a puppet parliament, erased the actual history of the nation, and fabricated a glorious new mythology. Watch what happens in Hungary. The track record of giving people like Orban unlimited power is not very good. But there is a glimmer of hope. Some of the Hungarian people have put up a sort of protest art installation in Freedom Square. They've installed barbed wire and placed shoes, pictures, letters, clothes, and other items that belong to murdered Hungarian Jews in the square as a reminder that there is a more accurate version of history. And it's not what Orban and his cronies are pushing. Power grabs like those we're seeing in Hungary are not uncommon in times of crisis, and if there's not a legitimate crisis around when they need it, would-be autocrats have no problem fabricating one. But whether real or fabricated, authoritarians often ride a wave of popular support to their end goal of absolute power. Take, for example, the deadly apartment bombings in Russia in 1999. Allegedly committed by Chechen terrorists, the bombings resulted in a surge of support for then Prime Minister Vladimir Putin, which allowed him to consolidate power and crack down on his critics. We've seen it all throughout history. Hitler using the 1933 Reichstag fire to stoke fear, curb civil liberties, and enable the creation of the Nazi Party, the fabrication of a communist plot to overthrow the Brazilian government in 1937, which allowed President Vargas to dissolve the constitution and establish a dictatorship, a failed 2016 coup in Turkey leading to a 2-year state of emergency, during which Erdogan tightened his grip on the nation, and now Orban's ascension to supreme leader in part thanks to a legitimate global health crisis. The rest of the world needs to take notice of how Hungarians are standing up to Orban. Besides keeping themselves and their families safe, opposing the spread of authoritarianism is the most essential thing any citizen can do in times like these. And that goes for people in any country, not just those on the brink like Hungary. If the people don't stand up to the lawmakers passing draconian legislation that trample on their rights and essential freedoms, then there's likely no stopping them. It's always much more difficult to get rid of laws that have become part of the status quo, like the Patriot Act. So yes, we need to take unprecedented action to prevent the spread of coronavirus, but we also need to be aware of how those in power take advantage of crisis scenarios for their own benefit. It's up to average citizens to hold their leaders accountable and fight for not only the preservation of democracy, but also its expansion. When you see the power start to consolidate in the hands of a tiny minority, it's time to speak up. If you'd like to learn more about the crisis making these authoritarian power grabs possible, I highly recommend you check out Coronavirus: Race for a Vaccine on CuriosityStream. It's a nice short documentary about the methods used to slow the spread of the virus while we search for a solution. If you watch my videos, you'll know I'm a big fan of CuriosityStream. It's an online streaming service with thousands of nonfiction titles from some of the best filmmakers in the game. You can find tons of great episodes like Coronavirus: Race for a Vaccine, and they've got a bunch of material on technology and outer space, which are some of my favorites. Their giant catalog includes content on science, nature, astronomy, technology, and lifestyle, among others. Unlimited access starts at just $2.99 a month, and as a special offer just for you guys, you can get a free trial by following the link below. CuriosityStream is available on just about every platform you can imagine, so wherever you are, you'll always have access to great, interesting content. As an added bonus, your CuriosityStream subscription now comes with a free Nebula subscription. Nebula is a new streaming platform built by and for creators like Wendover Productions, Real Engineering, Kurzgesagt, and of course, Second Thought and many others. It's a place for us to try new things and make original content that just wouldn't be possible on YouTube. Give CuriosityStream a shot and get free access to Nebula when you visit curiositystream.com/secondthought. If you enjoyed this episode, consider dropping a like. If not, a thumbs down. While you're here, check out some of my other work. I have videos on all sorts of topics, and I bet you'll find something you'll enjoy. Remember to subscribe if you'd like to see more episodes like this one, and click the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.